I'm a cloud and infrastructure architect with a company by the name of Scripps Networks Interactive. We'll talk about who they are. You know our brands, you probably don't know that name very well. This discussion is a wide-ranging bit where we spent the last year and a half or so trying to uplift our legacy and back office applications into something that's a little bit more forward-thinking and cloud compatible. So this is a discussion of where we are, how we learned what our gaps are, and where we think we're going to be going over the course of the next couple of years. Typical VMware disclaimer slide, no matter what I say, regardless of how cool it would be, VMware is under no obligation to make. So, we'll talk about who we are, we'll talk about our stuff, we'll talk about how we've used a couple of different things to get some good criticism that helped us out a lot. What we think our endpoint looks like today and where it would morph into, and the steps we're actively taking to be able to go from point A over to point B. So, the first question is, who is Scripps Networks Interactive? Our marketing blurbs describe us as a company that is a leading developer of lifestyle-centric media and entertainment for cable, for your phone, for your tablet, and for magazines. But the real thing is, Scripps Networks Interactive is HDTV, Food Network, Travel Channel, and a number of other cables, which is the reason why you lose your weekend, because you have to repaint your bathroom, or you have discovered what an amuse-bouche is. This team is responsible for the back-end infrastructure that supports these systems going back out there. S&I makes the vast majority of their money through what they call linear broadcasting. And linear is exactly like it sounds. Property Brothers comes on at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, and it plays out linearly until 9 o'clock. We put ads in there, and we get paid through that. That model is changing, though, and that model is changing very fast. Depending on who you listen to, between 15 and 45,000 people a month are cutting their cable contracts and watching content over the internet. So for the past several years, Scripps has started getting really good at what's called non-linear or over-the-top delivery of our content. So you can watch our shows on your tablet, on your TV, depending if you have Roku or Apple TV and stuff like this as well. And this is what forced us to go out to public cloud and get really, really good at that. We're headquartered in Knoxville, Tennessee, where HDTV was founded 22 years ago. We have 6 other offices in the United States. Our headquarters for Travel Channel International and Food Network UK over in London. And then Food Network Asia is headquartered out of the office in Singapore that I have offered to go and do tech support for, but have never been able to pull that off. We bought a network in Poland called TVN, which is the easiest way to think about them is a combination between CNN and TBS. We're trying to figure out what integration with them looks like at a macro level. We're discussing AD and things like that as well, but they operate largely independently from us at the moment. We also have some production support offices in a few cool cities, Miami, Sao Paulo, an office in Italy, one guy in South Korea, and over in Perth, Australia. In our Knoxville data center, you will see evidence of multiple moves and multiple iterations of technology. You will have 60 or so hosts across 4 UCS directors. That's a couple too many. We're working on that. About 1,300 virtual machines running across our enterprise, and almost a petabyte of storage that supports both VM and file. We also have a Hyper-V environment that's specifically targeted at my Microsoft SQL clusters. 5 hosts, 850 SQL databases that serve out most of the crown jewels that this IT department supports. The team's also been able to go through with VRA, a recent upgrade to 7, and they're able to do deployments to both the VMware environment and to my Hyper-V environment, largely for use by internal IT, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's a problem for us. The offices in the United States, the smaller ones, vCenter manages those environments across the board. My international offices are not significantly larger than that. The biggest difference between them is we have vCenters deployed in both of those offices just because of the latency between our WAN connections. It's a little hard to be able to move VMs around and do graceful management when you're at the other end of a 200 millisecond ping time. New York, though, the office where Food Network is headquartered, is a little bit of a different thing. And I absolutely love the Chelsea Market logo. I think that's very cool. That office is a little bit bigger. Food Network has their own operations. They do editing and stuff like that out of there as well. So we've got a few more hosts. There's some legacy physical servers there. Our newest of the remote office SANs are there as well. But New York is also our designated disaster recovery environment at the moment. And we do DR the old tried and true way. We've got a warm environment up there. We do nightly SQL backups in Knoxville, throw them up there and replay them in. And if I have an event, I can do a log replay and get the environment up and running very, very quick. It's not graceful, but it works for the scale of what DR we had to be able to accomplish for now. That's a problem. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later because it's been a really, it's a challenge for us. Scripps is also aggressively public cloud. We've been in Amazon for about 5 years. We've also been in Azure, I'll say 2. We played with it about 3 years ago, and play was about all we were successful doing. We've gotten a little bit better at that. Azure remains a challenge for us, but it's coming along. A typical month in traffic for what we do out of AWS will see us deliver about 170 million unique device visits to our property sites, about 850 million unique page views, and we will play out from our AWS infrastructure about 22 million video files. About half of those are stuff that is watched through food.com, HDTV.com, and stuff like that. Half of those are direct video streams to Roku, Apple TV, and stuff like that as well. To support that, we have seen some remarkable growth in what we chew in an EC2. So this graph goes back to 2014, and we started relatively modestly, but you can see how it's grown and grown and grown over time. And what I love about this map, specifically for what we had last year, is right there. That starts right around November, because everybody loses their mind at Thanksgiving and forgets how to cook a turkey and forgets how to cook a ham. We have about 3,000 instances right now up in EC2, and with the attached storage, we have about 400 terabytes of EBS that support that. But that dynamic growth is a fun thing to be able to watch in real time. When we started in Amazon, though, we started the way a lot of people do, a lift and shift. So when we did it, we would take a VM and we would just install it on the OS and move it up to Amazon. So we didn't do object storage. We kind of had to learn how to be able to do that inside of our infrastructure. So at first, S3 usage was nothing. It started nowhere. But as we got better and we started moving stuff to an abstraction layer, it grew and grew and it grew. You'll notice this graph stops in 2016. It's because at that point in time, we started moving our primary asset libraries. Assets for a media company are videos and a bunch of stuff like that up to S3. We have about 4 petabyte of EMC Isilon that stores that for us in our Knoxville data center. We moved it, we copied it. So I have about 5 petabyte of our assets in S3 storage across 2 billion separate objects. Video files, recipes. The recipe database on food.com is one of the coolest things you've ever got a chance to be able to play with that. Closed captioning files and other stuff like that as well. We do a little bit inside Azure, not a lot at the infrastructure level, just a handful of VMs, 1 production system. We do a lot at the platform as a service for analytics up there, and we've gotten really good at that. We do a lot of data munging, and because we're an O365 shop, we use Power BI as our analytics delivery to our executives. We also have not met a SaaS we don't like nor do business with. This is not comprehensive. This is just what I could fit in this half of the screen. So from an enterprise level, it's a challenge to try to remember where your data is and try to design processes that make you graceful in case something unexpected happens. Like when an engineer accidentally put a wrong command into S3, and all of these guys run in Amazon, and all of a sudden they're having problems as well. So while we love cloud, we are growing in understanding that there's risk in moving all your operations there. Because we've been so forefront and pushed the edge for public cloud so much, the capabilities that we've invested in and have grown internally have lacked. We haven't invested. My team, my customers, my business likes the self-service model that public cloud gives us. They're used to that, and they want to see the infrastructure be able to reflect that. And because they're used to immediacy, I want it now, and dang it, you better give it to me. The perception of my infrastructure reflects that. If you ask the average person who chews and consumes stuff, they'll tell us we're too slow. They'll tell us it's unreliable. They'll tell us it's expensive, or internally, they'll tell me it's not AWS. Why would I do it here when I'm so good at doing it there? That's the reality, the bimodal situation that we find ourselves operating inside of. So the team had to learn how to really look at themselves in the mirror and be able to take those lessons to heart. Before I jump into that though, especially because I've got a whole bunch of them sitting in the front row waiting for a chance to be able to make fun of me, I want to make sure of a couple of things. This is not a failing team. This is a team that's never had to fail their primary applications over to my DR site in New York, once. Our RTOs and RPOs greatly exceed what the business has demanded of us. And we've been able to do that with no budget and a significant amount of staff churn over the last couple of years. That's a really cool thing to be able to see from the inside. It's a remarkable group of technologists that I have the honor of working with. But to be honest with you, you have to understand it. The business is going to give you clues. They may not tell you we're moving to the cloud in a big way, but you'll hear it. They'll tell you that through reduced budgets, or they'll tell you that through reduced workloads. If you remember, I've got about 3,000 virtual machines up in Amazon. My 1,300 VM count on-prem is down from about 1,850 about 3 years ago. So the business has found something, they get there. It landed and it expanded and it is not stopping. I don't want to tell you what my monthly AWS bill is, but it's a lot. So there's something they're getting there that we're not giving them. So we needed to be able to figure that out. Fortunately, I had a couple of places where I could data mine from that. The business did a DR tabletop exercise that gave us some really interesting data points. They also did a business impact analysis where I was able to learn some other lessons from that. We also had a third party come in and do not really an audit of us, but had a lot of meetings with us to give us what their thoughts are on where we should be investing and where we should be tweaking. So the DR tabletop exercise. We have one legacy studio in our facility. It's where HGTV used to broadcast a country and western dance bar show back in the 90s. And so it's empty and it was a great place. So they grabbed 6 different departments and described a scenario in which a tornado hit Knoxville at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're trying to understand information. What do you do if you know this? What do you do if the power's starting to fail or you're starting to lose cooling? There were lessons there that we picked up as the disaster scenario started escalating. The first one, they asked us if we could reduce our running footprint in VMware, because we want to be able to consolidate down to as minimal a footprint as we can, so I have less power and less cooling consumption. Technically, it's simple to be able to do. The problem was my CMDB didn't have accurate identification of production running systems, and I didn't have those tags put into VMware. So in theory, I could start randomly studying stuff off. No one wanted to be able to do that. So we failed there. Technically, we were capable of doing something. I did not have the data to be able to act on that. When the DR scenario got to the point where we had to evacuate my facility in Knoxville, we failed our applications up to New York, virtually, but yeah, boom, you're up there. So the question was asked, well, how do we get in? And one of our directors goes, well, you just log in. Well, we're sitting in the middle of a city that's not on my WAN backbone anymore. How am I going to VPN into the corporate network? The only other VPN pop I have is in London. So I would be sitting at the internet here, I would go across the transatlantic cable, VPN, and then come back and run my Citrix fronted apps twice across the, not a good solution. We built this. We built a very large, very pretty hub of a multi-cloud, multi-location operation that cannot withstand the hub going away. So there were a couple of really good lessons that we started working on almost immediately thereafter. The BIA was fronted by the business. We had an internal company come in and talk to about 100 different people, 15, 16 different departments, to understand from the business's perspective, what are the critical things that they rely on? Not all are IT. Some of them could be external processes. Some of them are Excel spreadsheets. I don't want to talk about how much of our business is run with Excel, but it's more than 2 things that we do that are critical. But what we wanted to understand is what are those things, what are the applications, what are their interdependencies, and what does the business view as their criticality? They created this heat map. So the groupings are departments, the individual ones on the inside are processes that they think are key. The heat map tells you how quickly those processes need to be recovered. The ones in red, 3 days or less, a lot of them very, very quick. The ones in yellow, 3 to 7 days. The ones in green, 10 days or later, or why are we even recovering this? Because if you don't use it but once a month, seriously. So those are the ones that we don't really worry about. When we started walking through this, the business identified 100 mission-critical processes that translated into a minimum of 60 applications that I need to be able to provide DR for. It's a 5x increase in the number of applications I need to be able to protect. Do you remember me talking about Chelsea Market? That's where we do DR today. Chelsea has some challenges. I'm at the limit of power and cooling. There's a bunch of water pipes on the floor above that occasionally like to flood water that bad. The building caught on fire earlier this year. And frankly, New York is a city you disaster recovery from, not to. So no one's happy with this solution at the moment. So we are actively looking to be able to get out of this. This is our biggest play inside the VMware Cloud and AWS, by the way. It solves these problems very gracefully. IT also brought in a third party, a company by the name of Round Tower Technologies, to come in and vet what we were thinking in terms of hardware replacement and strategy and things like that as well. We wanted to make sure what we were thinking made sense. What fascinated me about this engagement, though, is while technically they were all over the board and it went way the hell too deep in some places, they concentrated on process more than technology in some ways. And I'm so glad that they did, because they found a couple things that I think are key. So Round Tower recommended we ditch Hyper-V. No one is sad about Hyper-V going away. They recommended about 200 pages of data and optimizations to be able to flip bits here and there to make us run a little bit better. They recommended that when we do our refresh, we take a serious look at hyperconverged. That's them's fighting words, depending on who you talk inside our infrastructure team. They recommended a tighter integration with ServiceNow and VRA, which we're actively working on right now. But their biggest finding was change control. They discovered there's some significant process changes between on-prem and the cloud. Like, on-prem, it's a slow approval process. A change can take up to 2 weeks to go through my change control process. And a change for us is any VM deployment, anything that affects a system either in dev or inside production. The cloud side of the house, though, does not participate in change control to a great extent. They don't see a business driver and why they want to be able to do that. And the CMDB is updated on a batch schedule after, rather than it being in advance and being approved for changes. You're never going to get parity between the two teams if I have a process that slows me down. Technically, I can meet or beat what I get out of Amazon, but if I have to wait for somebody to nod or click a button, I'll never get there. So what we learned from this, from the DR tabletop exercise, don't build that. Don't make it so I can't survive the center falling out. The BIA told me that I need to be able to design systems that are scalable. And then the Round Tower guys discovered some inequities in process. So you want to be able to make sure that they're consistent and across the board. So now that we had all the bad news and everyone's sitting around being sad, we wanted to be able to figure out what the end state should look like on the front end. And honestly, there were a lot of ways to be able to start, and we weren't sure what that needed to be able to look like. But we had some help. We had an architect from the VMware America's Solution Architecture Group come in and talk with us for about 4 or 5 hours. We had a lot of this data, but we weren't sure how to be able to map it back to capabilities and stuff like that as well. So over the course of a couple hours, we talked about what do we think our problems are, what do we think our challenges are, but more importantly, what do you want this to look like at the end of the day? So I'll be honest, this is all we're going to talk about. No, there's a lot of data here. It took us a couple of days to unpack this. There's a few things in here I want to be able to concentrate on, though, that I think are right on time for us. The first one, from an infrastructure level, baseline capability, we're going to roll out NSX to production next year. We're also talking about vSAN. We'll talk about that in a minute. But other than how storage functions, this maps remarkably well with what we're seeing out of the VMware Cloud and AWS. Matter of fact, VMC is the only specific product that's called out inside this framework because it solves and maps everything together for us very, very well. You start going up the stack a little bit and you get into IT as a service. We need to get better at creating service catalogs, something that's more useful than just internal IT. Yeah, it's cool that I can log into a portal or I can throw an API and I can deploy a Windows or a VM. What would be better is if I had full blueprints, multi-machine blueprints, and complete application stacks that are single catalog items. They're not easy to build, and you need help to be able to get that done, but we need to get there, and I need to be able to get there quick so my customers can start consuming my infrastructure the same way that they consume public cloud. The business, like everybody else in the room, has told us 2 contradictory things. Increase your uptime, but do it on less hosts and less infrastructure. Well, how do you get to the point where you're able to do that? Scripps is not money poor. So what we've been able to do from our infrastructure perspective before is spread out the running risk and reduce the mean time between failure by having more hosts. We don't run densely, we haven't had to be able to do that, and that gives you a really good SLA. But as we shrink our host count, I need to be able to take advantage of the data that VMware makes available all throughout the stack, so I can be more proactive, not only for break fix, but identify problems before they happen. So there's a number of tools inside the VMware stack that would help us with this, and these are all in our budget for next year. Continue walking up to NSX. My security team is remarkably excited about this. There's a couple things. Scripps as an organization likes to deploy technology and never, ever throw it away. I joked about access. I have one that's worse. We have a number of mission-critical processes that run on FileMaker Pro. Yes, that was the reaction I was looking for right there. He laughed. So I need to be able to support that. And I need to be able to support that, and a couple of them are installed on Windows 2003. My application whitelisting service doesn't run on Win 2K3 anymore. So how do I start reducing that attack surface? I reduce it with NSX. I can start wrapping a bubble around and make sure people can only talk to it that have to be able to talk to it. And I can control that. I don't have to go to cyber. Cyber can get the benefit of it, but I can control the knobs on that. So that's a cool thing for us. And east-west traffic flow, there's some benefits there to my networking team that they're anxious to be able to take advantage of as well. The thing that really, really jazzes us about this right now is the cross-cloud NSX stuff that they started talking about last year, and they're doing it today. A single pane of glass. I define a security policy. Whether that workload lives on-prem, it goes to VMC, or it goes to Amazon or Azure natively. I don't care. So now, so long as I define the workload and can identify what runs on it, security doesn't have to understand security here and then use a different tool here and change a security group here or understand. They don't have to do that. They don't have to worry about the technology. They're working up the stack too. This piece alone, if I could buy it today, I would. So this is going to change how we're going to interact with the business no matter where they're deploying stuff. When you start getting to the top of it for cloud and automation, for us, disaster recovery as a service needs to be a little bit more comprehensive. I'm not talking about just being able to recover it and fail it back. That's table stakes. Everybody should be able to do that. No matter how the application is deployed, it should onboard and get protected. I should be able to test it, and I should be able to give the customer something as easy as a dash button. Test your application, click this button, and you go off to the races. So there's some capabilities here that I think are really, really exciting. The other piece too is cost transparency. We don't do cost of IT at Scripps. I don't do chargeback or showback. I haven't been asked to be able to do that. But if you don't show the value of the money level, the customers and your business treats what you do not as valueless, but people associate cost with real. I get a bill from Amazon every month, so I know what the value I'm getting out of it is. The business pays in a 3-year increment, and then it's just all free. I don't want to be able to do that. I want to be able to show the business what the value of what this team delivers is. And some of the stuff inside the vRealize suite is going to help us be able to close that gap. The other piece that we're struggling with right now is real-time and accurate application dependency mapping. I can't do DR well if I don't understand what the upstream and downstream dependencies are. We have notions at it, but my CMDB at best is incomplete, at worst is inaccurate. And honestly, that second part is worse. So I don't know what to grab, I don't know what to fail over. So when the business asks me to protect it, I'm like, okay, so you take a guess and you pull random pieces of application. I need to be more comprehensive and orchestrate that in a graceful way. I also want that data to flow into ServiceNow, which is our ITSM, and have it be updated on a regular basis. So we're not sure what the 8 application dependency mapping tool is going to look like yet, but the BIA is our first step, and then we'll find technology that'll update that for us on a regular basis. At the end of the day, it's all connected. If I don't have a single source of truth, I'm going to be hunting around in the dark and going to fail. So how does this map to what we talked about earlier? Well, for location criticality, obviously VMC does a really good job for this. It's a good way to be able to get out of the biblical plague that is my New York disaster recovery solution. But other pieces inside the stack fit into this as well. My scalability, obviously VMC is a good play there as well, but the ability to be able to orchestrate stuff further up the stack also helps solve that. And my process, As soon as I start being able to get some standards and tiers and give customers feel for how they should consume our application, we'll start pushing that needle back towards parity. This is not something we're going to do next week because they're lazy. No, there's a lot of work here. It's a 3-year process. We're going to start with disaster recovery, and we'll start pushing out from there. We're going to start looking at service catalogs, what we want to be inside of that early, probably first quarter of next year, and then we're going to work towards a biannual release, eventually try to go quarterly, and start advertising those services out to the business. We do a bad job of selling. You know, it's like nobody gets excited when they see a commercial for the water company. We're the water company. But we need to do good, we need to get excited because everybody knows who Amazon is. Nobody knows who runs their infrastructure. Well, they're going to by the time we're done. So, how have we gone from point A to point B? How are we actively working this? Well, we wanted to make sure it was a partnership with vendors and partners because there is no such thing as free lunch. Apologies to Robert Heinlein. So, the challenge is, go back. We're kind of at the white paper problem. I'm refreshing hardware. I'm refreshing capabilities. Where do you want to start with that? Well, from the hardware perspective, everybody has an opinion. You throw 2 architects and a bunch of VMware admins and storage guys in a room, you have 5 guys, you're going to have 12 different opinions about where you're going to go by the end of the day. So we're not sure. Should we go just a traditional 3-tier refresh? Yeah, I mean, it would map well with us. We can get some of the newest generation UCS blades inside of our chassis, get an all-flash VMAX, and deliver more than enough I/O for what my applications need. I have an extreme I/O tied to my Hyper-V environment from Microsoft SQL, and I use about 10% of the capabilities of it. I could move them to a VMAX, and they'd never know the difference. So we're fine with that. And coordination with the network team is going to happen no matter where we go. I have a bunch of internal guys that are intrigued by what we've kind of called grow your own vSAN. Start off with some specific use cases like for a management cluster or maybe a pilot VDI project and start building our own vSAN capability and prowess there. The business, however, is really intrigued by some of the third parties, going for a proprietary type of hyperconverged solution. Not so much because their solution set is better, but because it can come in quicker and I don't have to build it. We run a kind of lean infrastructure department. So it's more of a total cost of ownership and quickness of deploy kind of play more than anything else. One of these is remarkably safe. One of these is remarkably quick. I don't really have a cool, clever thing to be able to say about vSAN other than I think it's really neat. My infrastructure guys lean towards this a lot, where they think we're going to end up going towards this. The managers and I am intrigued by what this could be at a lower level. I will say that HyperFlex is only included on there just to be for sake of completeness. We're not that masochistic. We probably won't go that route. To start vetting this technology out, we built out a lab. I'm the only one who calls it the TAL, the Technology Assessment Lab, because I stole that name from a previous employer. It's a horrible name. I'm looking for a better one. But what we had hardware, and thumping good hardware, hanging around not doing anything. And we built it in such a way that it is separated from that change control process that causes us so much consternation and problem. The idea was to bring it in, set it up, and be able to test it and poke it and break it and not have any problems and have it be usable by multiple teams. My network guys can get in there and play around. We can get in there and play around. I have external customers coming in. We're doing some ServiceNow VRA integrations and we're using the lab to be able to model that stuff out. It's a great bit of capability that we've been able to bring to bear just with some stuff hanging on the shelf. So what we built out was this. We started off and replicated the VMware and Hyper-V environment at a smaller scale with the hardware and built out a side that represents the headquarters and a side that represents a typical remote site. And my network guys, with the help from one of our partners, a company called TechLinks, built out a path where my bandwidth between the 2 sides of my lab exactly replicate the kind of traffic speeds that I would have between us and like Atlanta. From the capabilities perspective, we built out a lab with NSX, VRNI, and VRA. Round Tower helped us with this as well. One of their guys came in and helped us roll NSX out probably within a day, which for us would have taken more than a day. So that was a really good thing that they came in and helped us with that. A guy by the name of Nick Bonifacio did a really good job with us there. The lab is protected from the production environment by a firewall, so we can get in and administer it, but anything we do in there is not going to come back out and start affecting production workloads. So it's kind of bubbled off from us. Lab has its own Azure subscription, so we have a VPN up to resources that are up on top of there. We have a specific AWS account set up for the lab so we can run native EC2 instances. And the lab is where we have been participating in the VMware Cloud on AWS from the Lighthouse days. So we have a dedicated environment for VMC that has its own VPN, and this is what I can't wait for. We just became a paying customer for VMC last week, and with the latest code release, when I rebuild it, I can finally do that. I can connect my VMC lab to native EC2 instances that are running inside of the lab and try to start modeling how I'm going to connect running workloads on-prem in VMC and start talking to S3 and start talking to RDS and start figuring out what that means for me from an application topology perspective. That's the piece I've been waiting for, and I can't wait to be able to get in there and start tooling around. So where have we gone with technology assessments? What have we actively done inside the lab to get from point A to point B? Well, NSX, the low-hanging fruit. It was the first thing we deployed inside the lab, and that's easy. Everybody knows why you deploy NSX. Microsegmentation, load balancing, the ability to be able to do networking is a good thing. I will say that an NSX deployment, even inside of a greenfield environment, is one of those things where the infrastructure guys are at one end of the table, the network guys are at the other end of the table, and it's like they're babbling. Every once in a while, you catch a word, and then you're lost again. We work like this. My infrastructure team's on one side of the house. We're on the same macro team, but my networking guys are on the other side. NSX does this to how we operate. We don't operate like that. So our fear is, inside the same portal, well, okay, my fear is, I'm an architect, so I should not have access to be able to do that, but I could break the environment really, really quickly by clicking on something wrong. I've done that in the lab a couple of times so far. So we've asked VMware to come up with some recommendations on what classes, foundational, understanding how NSX really works and try to figure out inside that same pane of glass, how are my VMware administrators, how are my network guys going to work together, and what kind of RBAC level would be appropriate for me to look but not be able to break crap. That's important because I do not want that to happen. NSX for us has always been paired with vRealize Network Insight. I don't think you deploy this technology without them coming together, especially for us. So inside the lab, we were able to do a feed, and actually this is production vCenter data. So you can see how our traffic segregation really goes from vCenter's perspective. Not deep, but you can get some cool things. 97% of my traffic is east-west, which is about what you would be able to expect. 33% of it is switched, 67% of that is routed. That's really interesting statistics for my networking team who's getting ready to do a core refresh inside my data center next year. They can use this to try to figure out if they can go lower and switch at top of rack, or maybe go higher at the router end to be able to figure out how that traffic flow goes. For the first time, I have really good control, and I can provide data that can potentially lower my cost on a networking perspective. That's a really cool thing. How many of y'all did the VRNI lab last year at VMworld when they first did it? The ability to be able to draw these kind of maps, go from one VM to the other and go back and show you traversal back and forth was one of the ones that got me really excited on Sunday morning. Matter of fact, my team hated me because I'm emailing them, I'm saying, oh my God, you need to come look at this lab, it's the coolest thing. Because I had just spent 3 weeks with my firewall and my networking guys and my AWS guys to deploy an Active Directory server in EC2. Ports for Active Directory are ridiculous, and trying to be able to find communication paths back and forth. This tool I would have bought in a heartbeat if it had been available, and they're almost there. I can't do AWS pathing yet, but what I can do now, and this is the latest release of VRNI that just came out a couple weeks ago, I can do flow data from AWS now, and I can do network security group reporting inside the VRNI portal to my sources that are AWS account specific. So if I've got a question about what network security groups with a port path from this path to this path, I'm starting to be able to report it. And the stuff that I'm looking for, that path generation data, is part of the NSX cross-cloud services stuff. They're building the graphs that I want today. So this stuff remains absolutely central to us. Backup. That's a bad word for me. We do this right now. I back up VMs to a local storage, tapes are shipped off to a storage mountain somewhere, and we've started replicating backup data to an S3 bucket. The next thing we're going to start working on is this. How do I restore backup data to running VMs inside VMC? That's easy, and it should be trivial for anybody to be able to do that. What I'm intrigued by, though, are other potential options. There's a couple other vendors that can take backup data and hydrate them into running workloads in a couple of different clouds. It would never be for something in production. It would be for spot solutions if I have an extended outage and I need to be able to move some stuff around, and if for some reason I can't recover it gracefully. I'm looking for options in my Swiss Army knife in case I need to be able to pull them back out. So we currently run net backup, so we're getting ready to upgrade to the latest version, so I want to see what capabilities are there. We've talked with Rubrik. There's some intriguing stuff there. Commvault intrigues me. The complications with Commvault scare me, but I'd like to be able to play with it and see what it does for me. So we're trying to figure out what backup needs to look for us. Data protection, though, there's some other cool options that are starting to come on market. So for us, our users at our remote sites and at our location in Knoxville have local departmental and personal file shares that are shared locally. What we learned, though, during our DR tabletop exercise is if Knoxville happens to go away, I lack the ability to be able to get gracefully back into that and have my users get to their shares. The BIA told us that access to file data is among those critical processes that keep the business flowing. So this is a big deal for us to be able to solve gracefully. So what we're trying to be able to look at is rather than them being stored locally, can I move departmental file data out to an object storage bucket, whether it be Azure or Amazon or someplace like that, and then front and cache it locally. That way, if they're at home, they can still get access to the data, and I can have checkpoints where I can provide file backup and recovery and stuff like that as well. Targeted for remote site first. If it works, we'll look at Knoxville later. So we've been talking with EMC about their Constellation product. We tried it a little bit. We're still playing with it. We're talking with Nasuni as well. There's some stuff here that I think intrigues me from a remote office perspective first, and we'll see how enterprise class it really is. VRA and ServiceNow integration continues to be a work in progress for us. We don't do ServiceNow remarkably well, but it is and we have a lot of processes that are tied into it. The more we can tie these things together, probably using ServiceNow as our service catalog and be it the primary holder for request flows and stuff like this, and kick off the jobs into VRA. So we started some initial integrations with that, and this will continue as we get better and better at building the service catalogs out. I've been waiting for this. So when VMC first got announced, I had an email into my system engineer, I think at the exact same time he was emailing me. We had spent about a year talking about our environment, talking about everything that we do inside Amazon, and this had all those keywords that everybody thought would be a really cool solution for us to play with. And we pushed hard to be in on the Lighthouse program, and we got accepted. That was a really cool day when we got that email. Because really, it fit all the puzzle pieces that we were looking at. I run VMware. I'm ignoring Hyper-V because it's not germane to this particular conversation, but I run VMware on-prem. I run up in Amazon, and I have systems that run there natively. And I have true hybrid applications. Those media asset systems, the 5 petabyte of objects that are up in S3, portions of that application stack live on-prem in Knoxville. Portions of them live natively up in Amazon, all in EC2, US East. So we are a true hybrid running inside that application stack. I'm looking at being able to protect, from a DR perspective, workloads up to US West, which for me is exactly where I want it. I don't want to have everything on the East Coast. I'm one hurricane away from having a really, really bad day. So I throw that crap across the country and I'm protected geographically. But as VMC continues to go out and they expand out to US East, those hybrid workflows can go like that. I can protect those applications and keep them close to data gravity. So those hybrid applications, those workflows, I can start enabling that almost immediately. And as a matter of fact, the thing that I think they're going to find, they're going to run better because they're closer to the data and they're running on Amazon Fiber on the back end. So this hit, not only buzzword, solved so many technical problems as this service continues to mature. What have we found playing with it? It's a forcing function. None of my VMware admins were huge fans of the H5 client. to have two different versions of the client up to do what are seemingly easy because you never know what's going to change. You never know where the button is. It's like the first time you install a new version of Office. Where have they hidden this particular function I use all the time? H5 client's kind of like that. It's like a treasure hunt every time you go in and you start playing with it. It's so much better now than it used to be, but it was a forcing function for us. So the upgrade to vSphere 6.5 for compatibility and easier use with VMC, it's going to force us to keep current. It's also forcing us to use content libraries for the first time. We throw files onto a LUN and we access our ISOs and do all that stuff there. Guess what I can't do in VMC? So content libraries we started playing with for the first time, and that's easy. It's just a new thing for us to be able to play with and start syncing and get used to how they function. Internally though, it lets me shut this guy up because it is AWS. So it short circuits that conversation an awful lot. Those are three very magical initials for my company. If it's within the AWS ecosystem, everyone goes, oh, okay, I'll use that as much as I possibly can. We will use this for the disaster recovery as a service stuff that's coming. I have yelled at Ben Metacroft, I think 3 different times this week, telling him to get this ready for me. So we will use this because in terms of costing and in terms of scalability, it's that. It's scalable, it's affordable. We talked about this, it's in the West Coast, it's a good thing. And quite frankly, their data center is not going to flood or catch on fire probably. So that's a good thing for us. The other piece that I thought was remarkable, when we got the first look at costing for VMC, it immediately started us looking through what this means for us longer term. So our plan for hardware refresh was this. Next year, we refresh all of our storage and peel off 1/3 of our compute and do that same thing over the course of the next couple of years. Traditional hardware refresh cycle, no matter whether it goes hyperconverged or whatever, we're going to get it done in 3. When we started looking at costing for VMC though, it was really, really interesting because maybe rather than replacing all the storage, maybe I replace some of it and replace the oldest of the compute and get it off the floor. And starting in 2019, maybe I move some of it up to VMC in Oregon. Maybe the next year I move some of it to Ireland or East Coast. All of a sudden it gives us options because the costs when you start looking at it over a multi-year model start lining up very aggressively. So it gives us options and provide a menu back to the business to try to figure out where they want to be able to go. It was a really cool day. My primary VMware admin, as we were looking at the models, and I started looking at the host count as it approached what he runs today, he's like, so I guess my stuff's moving to Oregon. And I'm like, maybe. So this is the piece that I'm waiting for the most though. When we have NSX deployed on-prem and we are protecting our production workloads, and they have deployed the full NSX stack up on VMC, all of a sudden I can start moving workloads out to avoid unintended downtime. If I've got to do a patch or something like that, I can do that. I can move that workload up from Knoxville up to Oregon, and then move it back when all that remediation work is done. What's cool about that is that increases my availability. It's an easy migration path. I mean, it'll take a couple minutes and I might lose a couple pings, but it's still pretty cool to be able to do. Oops. You know, it improves my SLA delivery, and as silly as it sounds, that GWS technology comment is actually really, really important. Talk to your customer and say, I'm going to move it from here to here, see what your performance looks like, and they might whine for about 3 seconds and then they're going to be fine. So that's a cool thing to be able to go back to your customers and say, we're protecting it like that. So what do our steps look like? So immediately, right now, we're right in the middle of begging for money. Our budget process just went in and we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like. Things look good for the NSX and the VRNI and the hardware replacement. We're making the cases for some of the stuff that's a little lower on the important piece, but we're going to get there. We're continuing to work on the VRA and ServiceNow integration. And we're also confirming my list of applications that the business is expecting me to be able to take care of. Starting next year, it's a really, really busy thing. We'll start the hardware replacement process. We'll start testing SRM for production apps. My goal is by mid next year, I have fully evacuated DR out of New York, and it will be running in VMC over in Oregon. We'll start looking at ways to be able to protect and rehydrate tier 2 applications towards the end of next year. So I'm being more comprehensive in case there's an extended outage and I need to be able to take care of the applications that need to be recovered within 3 days or so, the yellow and the less critical red ones. We'll provision a 10 gig direct connect to be able to take care of the replication traffic. We're starting working through that right now, and we'll have that. We have a 1 gig direct connect to US East, so this will be our second one going up to Amazon. And when VMC crosses the pond and gets deployed over into Europe, that maps really, really well to our international office. So we'll start looking at what could potentially start going for international as well. The stuff with them, the stuff with the guys over in Poland, that might be a really interesting play for us, and we'll start figuring out where that goes. You get a little further out than that, it's really, really difficult to be able to predict. I can make predictions, but if I came back here next year, what I said is no way in hell it's going to be close. So we're going to put a pin in that. What are our immediate next steps? We just finished consolidating on Hyper-V. We did that to avoid some significant SQL charges. So I'm going to have to go back to the business again and say, hey, thanks for letting us consolidate. I'm going to do it one more time. But then I tell them why I'm doing it one more time, and they'll go, I don't understand it, but I trust you, and we'll go. So we're going to coordinate some DR testing across the board and start getting that going. I can't wait to start showing what VRNI does to my Amazon teams. The guys that are especially responsible for my media asset library applications, them being able to troubleshoot the physical and the virtual and the stuff that's up in Amazon at the same time. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting day. It'll be the first time I'll have ever had them natively use a VMware suite tool, so there'll be some celebrating that day. We've got a lot of training, and depending on where we go from the hardware perspective, HCI could muck this whole thing up, and we'll have some other stuff to be able to go there as well. So next couple years are going to be really fun, but really, really busy. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for coming so early.